From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Larry R. Surratt. I'm the president of the Daniel A. P. Murray African American Cultural Association of the Library of Congress. I welcome you on behalf of our first African American Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden, and we welcome you to the most beautiful library in the world. The Daniel A. P. Murray Association of the Library of Congress and the Motion Picture Broadcasting and Recorded Sound Division of the Library of Congress want to welcome you to an interview with the awesome Russell Williams II. We welcome you and hope that you will enjoy the interview. Thank you. Now we'll have the highlight library collections. Will y'all come at this time?
Hi, everyone. Everybody can hear me okay? Okay, great. So my name is Harrison Beal. I'm a reference librarian in the Recorded Sound Research Center in the Motion Picture Broadcast and Recorded Sound Division. And we're very happy to be co-sponsoring this event today, and we're excited for the interview as well. I thought I'd just give you a little bit of an overview of our collections, our history, and some of what we have available in recorded sound and how it pertains today. The recorded sound collections here at the library are born out of deposits that were made to the library starting back in 1926 with early 78 RPM records. At that time, recorded sound was part of the music division, and then in the 70s, the recorded sound section was split out independently, and the collections were developed on their own. Sound recordings weren't covered under copyright until 1972, but once they were, the library started acquiring additional copies and our collections really exploded. So since that time, the library has also been actively collecting materials that were produced before then to build out a representative historical collection of sound recordings. Currently, we have about 3.5 million items in our holdings. They're all stored down at Culpeper, Virginia at the National Audiovisual Conservation Center. State-of-the-art preservation facility with climate-controlled storage spaces, and then also dedicated preservation staff and processing staff that take care of the collections and make them accessible to the public. We do that in a couple of different ways. There's dedicated preservation going on all the time on large collections that are prioritized by our curatorial sections. That includes the NBC radio collection, over 125,000 discs we received from NBC covering from the 1920s up into the 1970s. And those are being preserved all the time and more are being made available. But our preservation is also dictated by the requests from our patrons and our users who come into the Recorded Sound Research Center, request materials, we can get those digitized for them on demand, and access is provided up here on the Hill. So we're the access point for this huge collection that's being taken care of down in Virginia. We have, as you can see on the back table here, we have a display of some of the formats that are included in our collections, over 120 years worth of ideas for how to capture sound recordings, from cylinders all the way up to magnetic tapes, to the infamous 8-track and beyond. So take a look back there. We're happy to answer any questions about them, and that's part of what makes our collection so unique and challenging, is all the different ways that we've recorded material and made it available. I'm sure Mr. Russell's career spans quite a few of those different formats, and quite a few challenges have come up from that as well. A lot of your material is likely represented in our collections through LP releases and things like that too. So don't worry, you're well taken care of here. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague for motion picture.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Josie Walters Johnston. I'm a reference librarian in the Moving Image Research Center, which is the sister reading room to Harrison's reading room. We are located in the Madison building in room 336 on the 3rd floor, right across from P&P. I just wanted to give you a short introduction again to what our reading room does. As Harrison explained, we are split to 2 reading rooms and also the Packard campus down in Culpeper, Virginia. We have over 1.2 million moving image items that cover all sorts of formats. And along with that, we probably have another 2 million like paper documents to support the research of that film and television material. The items in our collection, it spans the history of film and television industry, from Edison's kinetoscopic record of a sneeze, which was produced in 1894, to last season's Stranger Things. So it's kind of like a lot of material that we have in the collection. But we also have feature films, newsreels, educational industrial films, television news, documentaries, reality TV program, TV ads, and much, much more. As Harrison said in his statement, the majority of the material that we get in our collection is through copyright deposit. You want to register a material with us, you need to send us a copy. But then we also have things like gift collections and things that are donated to us. NBC television news collection is a huge collection that we have. In the back, some of the display items, it's actually the first episode of a series called Wide Wide World from 1955, I believe that was. So it's kind of an ornamental cover. They didn't all come, all the reels did not come in gold-plated kind of cover things. But so we have things like that in our collection as well. Another very large collection is the NET, National Educational Television, PBS collection, huge collection. And actually on that note, in terms of material that is accessible, that collection is now, or parts of that collection can be accessible through the American Archive of Public Television. Cool thing about that collection, you do not necessarily have to physically be here to get that material. You can log on to the website from wherever and you can watch PBS programming. Most of it is going to probably focus more on like local PBS stations, which is actually pretty cool, but there are some of the larger programs as well. Searching for materials in our collection, it means utilizing a bunch of different resources. There's the Library of Congress online catalog, the Merged Audiovisual Information System, Mavis, which is an in-house. We still have a card catalog. We still love our card catalog. And we also have finding aids. Without getting into a lot of detail on how to do those, I'd be happy if you come down and visit, give us a call, can talk about how to access that material, how best to utilize that, the resources there. As I mentioned, the majority of material is stored in Culpeper. So most requests for viewing material need to be made in advance. The only exception to that is anything that has already been digitized. If something has been digitized, we can usually give it to you on the spot. Unlike what your experience might be in recorded sound, which is almost completely digital when you're coming in to listen, in the Moving Image Research Center, you might be accessing like several different formats on one day. So you might have, say, you're coming in tomorrow, I'm going to start with my 16mm film, going to walk around to the other side of the viewing room, going to watch some 35, then going to go to the other side again and watch a Laserdisc, maybe pop in a Betamax, watch a DVD, maybe a 3/4-inch U-matic tape, and then end my day watching digital material. So we cover all of those different formats. And then in addition to the moving image themselves, we also have paper material. So we have periodicals, reference books, subject files, screenplays, transcripts, photographs, lobby cards, press kits, pretty much anything that will help supplement your film or television research. In the back, just to point out a couple of the examples and material that are back there, the first thing you'll see is actually a press kit from the Field of Dreams. It's actually the press kit and production notes are inside. And I already mentioned there's the NBC TV collection, the Wide Wide World premiere episode. And then items 3 and 4 are essentially from the same collection. It's our earliest collection. It's called the Paper Print Collection. that's a portion of it called the paper print fragment collection. So this is material that was received before there was a way to register your films for copyright. So this would be anything before 1912. So those are back there as well. And then on the side, we both have handouts that you can take with you. There is just information, pamphlet information about both reading rooms. There's how to search. We have viewing guidelines. There's some moving image resources. Spell it all out. And then also, it did take some time to go through our collection to see what films and television programs that we actually had of Mr. Williams. And we pretty much have all of them except for, I would say, I'm going to estimate 10 things. And so this will include really early stuff from 1981, and then all the way through his unedited History Makers. It's like 3+ hours oral history interview. So, and it's really cool to listen to. So I encourage everyone here to stop by, come visit us, pop in just to say hi. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about any questions you may have. If you're looking for something specific, I'd be happy to help you. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison and Josie, for that wonderful introduction of the collection that we have in the back. Here at the Library of Congress, we have just about anything that you want to research is here in these 3 buildings. And when you say you want to come to the Library of Congress, you really need to know which building you're coming to, because we have 3 buildings, and mostly everybody go to the most beautiful library in the world before they come to the Madison building or either the Adams building. So we have just about anything you want here at the library. At this time, we're going to have our introduction by Iris Taylor. She's our treasurer of the Daniel A. P. Murray Association.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to this delightful program. Over a year ago, on Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, I attended a dear friend's, Dr. Cheryl LaRoche, annual MLK luncheon celebration. While there, I met an amazing person named Joya. And we chatted, and of course I talked about the Library of Congress and the Daniel A. P. Murray African American Association. And Joya said, I know the perfect person to come to the Library of Congress. He is down to earth, very nice, very kind, and so forth. Then she mentioned the film Glory. I'm thinking, Denzel Washington. I said, wow. You never know who you may meet. I say all that because today I have the pleasure and honor to introduce Mr. Russell Williams II, who is a native of Southeast Washington, D.C., and also a former employee of the Library of Congress. He received an interdisciplinary bachelor's degree in film production, art history, and literature from the American University in 1974. Soon after that, he worked at WRC NBC TV as an engineer during the week and co-managed Spirits Known and Unknown, a radio workshop on campus for minority communication students that was unique in the public radio network. Williams moved to the Los Angeles, California area in 1979. In Los Angeles, he built a reputation for getting to the oral center of the scene and preserving it as well as marrying it to the visual. His career has spanned live network television with a list too numerous to announce. If you picked it up in the back, oh my goodness. Including the Watergate hearings, radio production, theater, multi-track recording, film documentary, and feature film sound recordings. His quest for perfection has garnered him 2 Academy Awards in the category of sound for the movies Glory and Dances with Wolves. and 2 Primetime Emmys for the documentaries Terrorists on Trial, The United States versus Salim Ajami, and 12 Angry Men. He is the first African-American multi-Academy Award winner. Mr. Williams took his many years of experience in the industry and applied those lessons to producing a career he is very passionate about. He has worked jointly with ISIS Films director Bobby Holland on videos, commercials, and behind-the-scenes documentaries. This seasoned veteran of the motion picture world has spent more than 30 years applying his trade on all but 2 continents and in all but 4 of the 50 states. His credo has been getting the most with the least clutter and confusion. In 2002, Williams relocated back to Washington, D.C., where he now serves as a distinguished artist in residence and a professor in the School of Communication, Film, and Media Arts program at the American University. Let's give a resounding applause for Mr. Russell Williams, who will be interviewed by Louise Cavell. Mr. Louise Cavell.
Prof, good to see you. Good to be seen. Thank you very much. This is a great honor to be here with Professor Russell Williams II, and I thank the Daniel A.P. Murray African American Historical Association, Blacks in Government, and the Library of Congress for this opportunity. Let's get right to it.
All right. I just want to apologize. I couldn't get Denzel here for you today. He was busy, but he sends his love, as always.
Don't worry, Prof. You're looking pretty good yourself.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Let's just get right into it because we've had a chance to talk to one another through the week, and I'm so excited to start.
Okay.
Let's talk about D.C. Let's talk about Southeast Washington, D.C., and your parents, who I think had a very fundamental role to play in your life. I love the stories of your mom and dad. And just to start to talk about the D.C. of old, the old Southeast, the Southeast where kids were raised by members of the community and their parents.
Correct.
People cared in a certain way, and compassion, I think, was there, if I remember correctly. So if we could start there.
Well, Louise, thank you, and thank everybody who came out today. There's some other distinguished Southeast residents and kids in the room. One I want to point out right off the top is retired federal judge Gerald B. Lee, who is a co-manager and co-creator of Spirits Known and Unknown. And I have a very dear first cousin sitting in the front row, Althea. Would you just wave at everyone? Rolled in from Nevada last night, rolling back to Nevada this afternoon. She just wanted to come here and bring the family love. I have other family members here, but the Southeast that we grew up in was a very tight-knit community. It's not the Southeast that you typically see on television today. Generally, it's bad news if Southeast shows up on TV these days, and it's a really unfair portrayal. Everybody knew everybody else's kids, Louise. All the kids knew everybody else's parents. So just because you went around the corner and broke a bottle or maybe, threw a piece of paper in the middle of the street or something in someone's yard and ran around the corner assuming that you had gotten away with something, I'm sorry, old Ma Bell on those rotary telephones, you young people Google that. See what it looks like. It's, there was no digital devices back then. Just Google it. And mom or dad or somebody would be standing out on the porch waiting for you to get back. Were you at Mr. Clavell's place and did you break a ball in front of his house? And So we knew that all eyes were on us. we also knew that you were penalized if you disrespected your elders. You were penalized if you disrespected other people's property. We were also taught that regardless of one's station in life from an economic standpoint, a job or title, you had to respect everybody. And everyone could take a piece of you if you stepped out of line. That's at church, that's at school, you know what I'm saying? That's one of the neighbors up the street. I remember distinctly, I think second grade, I hit somebody with a spitball. First thing in the morning, okay, boom, teacher took me out by the hand, making sure that I felt pain on the way to the assistant principal's office. This was a Davis Elementary School, by the way. Then the assistant principal took a piece of me, and then they did the most horrible thing I could imagine. They called my mother at home. And mother, who at that time wasn't driving, had to walk to school to get her recalcitrant son, walk me back, tuning me up all the way. So that was probably 10:30 in the morning. So I'm figuring, okay, I'm done, right? But here comes about 5:30 or 6, here comes my dad, and it starts all over again. I only had one job to do. That was to get A's and B's. And if I'm in school clowning and being disruptive, that's not the son that he and his mom and his wife wanted to raise. And even as a high school student in Wilson, if I'm standing at the bus stop on Benning Road, my old Davis principal would roll by and say, "Williams, are you still getting A's and B's? Have you been in any kind of trouble? I'm gonna check on you. I'm gonna check with your dad to make sure." I mean, this seemed like a lifelong connection. Mm-hmm. That was the Southeast that we grew up in. The people I pointed out, and I'm sure others that are in here.
Yeah, well, we'd really like to get some of those qualities back into the community, and part of the value of speaking with you today is having a master's class with a master teacher. And I think that as we listen, the young people and people with children in the audience, as well as people that are your age, can reflect on the experience, and maybe we can get back to some of that. Okay. Let's talk about, say, high school in Wilson. Okay. And I know that you played band, and we're talking about sound design, and a great within that genre. So was band at Wilson the first area of sound that you entered into?
Well, I will have to go back a few years when I was actually about 10 years old. I was attending a church in Northwest with my parents, and for some reason, I want to say the choir was singing spiritual, that the title is I Hear a Voice of Praying. And it was a cappella, and they were in good form that day. And I got a little misty-eyed, and some of the elders who saw me in the congregation ran to my mom and said, "I think Russell's been called to preach." No, but I do want to take piano lessons. So about 10 years old, I started taking piano, and one of the pictures that's going by, that's me standing between two ladies. One of those ladies was my first piano teacher, Claretta Proctor, and that's also a shot of me right on there now at a recital that just passed. But so playing piano was the first thing that really made me a critical listener. Playing piano also was the first time that I'd heard this whole story about music can calm the savage beast. But that's stuff that old folks say to you. It doesn't really mean anything. They're just saying that stuff to you just to get you out of their face. Mm-hmm. So for some reason, I can't remember what it was, I was very upset with my mom one day, and I said, okay, and she was watching her soap operas. I said, I'm going to ruin her day. I'm going to go downstairs and start banging on the piano so loud that it's going to interrupt her watching the soap opera, right? And I kind of wore myself out doing that. And I said, well, I'm down here, might as well do my lesson, which wasn't anything really complicated at that point. It was like dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee. It wasn't anything like Rachmaninoff or Bach or anything. But literally about 3 or 4 minutes later, I couldn't remember what I was angry about. Mm. And so that was the first time I realized how music can transport you. I would blame the 1959 Ben-Hur, which I saw as a 7-year-old, for really showing me the power of music in film, because I know I was sitting next to my parents and I said, I don't know what this movie's going to be about, but it sounds very important. But, 10 years old was when I actually put my hands on an instrument for the first time. So that led to going to Wilson by my piano teacher's suggestion to get onto a orchestral instrument as well as playing piano. That's when I really developed an appreciation for arrangers and composers and things like that. And as far as I was concerned, I was going to be a music major. And then my master pianist made the mistake of telling me about some of his co-heads at Peabody Conservatory. A couple, three, had jumped out of a window because they had failed the final exam. I said, you know what? Maybe not, maybe not. You know, I want to keep my love of music as something that's no pressure involved.
Less dangerous.
And so that's when I kind of started thinking about something in the communications field by the time I got to American Youth.
Well, that's interesting. I can see the less dangerous approach, but then after the piano, I think you picked up the tuba, which seems like a dangerous instrument back again.
Well, it was dangerous riding on the Maryland bus. You all remember the WMA bus? Now, that's real D.C. folks, if you remember D.C. Transit, but then on the other side of town was this orange, kind of brownish bus called WMA, which was kind of like the second cousin from a bad marriage in terms of transit systems. And by that time, I was at Kramer Junior High, and Miss Lockhart, who was our band director, orchestra director actually, said, oh, I'm so happy that you want to pick up another instrument. And she had this room full of instruments that nobody was playing, and so she was suggesting maybe a clarinet or maybe a violin or something. And I'm thinking, no, I don't want to take another hard instrument. And I said, what's that orphan in the corner over there? It was a tuba. It was kind of bent up and needed some brasso on it. So she said, oh, that'd be great, because I don't really have anybody playing in the low register. And I knew already I could pick up the tuba parts probably by Monday and just sound the note on the piano, find it on the tuba, and, you know, I could already read music. So that was a done deal, right? Except I said, okay, so where's the case? Oh, there is no case. Okay, so here's Pudgy Russell on the bus with a tuba. And so you all can go on and figure out the comedy routines that spawn from those trips back and forth. But anyway, you know, I weathered that as a lot of other, you know, banter in Southeast D.C. I mean, I think growing up in Southeast made it really easy to merge into professional workers when people think that they've cut you or they've insulted you, if they said something that was going to, you know, get you off of your mark. And I'm like, no, you got to actually you need to go to grad school. You can go to middle school in Southeast, then you can learn how to insult people. This isn't even an inconvenience, you know.
I see your point. I also remember you talking about your dad and the lessons that you learned from him. I would imagine at that time when you're going through high school, your relationship with him was very connected. Can you talk a little bit about what he did and what kind of influence he had on you? Well,
you know, I'm probably not unusual in this room, especially at my tender age of 30, times 2, plus 5, yeah. Don't rush me. All right, I'll get there, but I'm not there yet. So actually I had 2 dads. So I had Russell Williams Sr., and unfortunately I had lost my birth mother the day after I was born. So standing there in the emergency room was James Harshaw and my mother's next oldest sister, Ruth. And they were childless, and they made the commitment right at that moment to say, you know, we'll raise your son, because Russell Williams was working the night shift at Union Station as a red cap. So basically, it was tag team. He was a Taurus, Russell Williams the first, James Harshaw was a Taurus, and I want to say Ruth was a Taurus. So it was actually, you know, I was getting it 3 different ways. So James Harshaw was a master carpenter. He worked at the government printing office, and he also, you know, like pretty much any other African-American male or female back then, they had 2 or 3 other side jobs. He drove a cab, you know, on days off. He also, because of being a master carpenter, he would get together with other buddies. A next-door neighbor who couldn't be here today, her husband was a painter, and down the street we had a mason, and around the corner we had someone who did electrical work, and they did a lot of recreational rooms. You remember those? Did, you know, the knotty pine walls and the drop ceilings and all of that. And, you know, I'm sawing wood and doing this kind of stuff, saying I'm never going to be a carpenter, but interested in a carpenter job. But, you know, I learned a trade. I learned how important it was to be precise. I learned how important it was to make sure that the customer was satisfied. So that was one of the lessons from James Harshaw, and I used that lesson about learning a trade later on in life. Russell Williams Sr., he loved the blues. His motto, or his saying, regardless of when all the other voices, my half-sisters and everybody were in the room partying and discussing the pros and cons of this, that music artist or this style, and they would get all up in arms. He said, look, he said, don't sweat the small stuff. So that was, you would hear him say that at least 2 or 3 times a visit, don't sweat the small stuff. He was only focused on the big picture. So there weren't too many folks I could go to have a pity party. You know, Mr. Harshaw would say, well, you know, that's a problem, but you know what? Half the people are glad you have problems, the other half don't care. So which group are you going to complain to? That was his way of saying you have to work this out on your own.
Fantastic. I want to get back to some of the things that Mr. Harshaw told you before you went to NBC.
Okay.
'Cause I think that's fantastic. But I think this is a good point to start to talk about the library.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Professor Williams, you've been an employee of the library before. Could you describe that experience a little for us?
There's a gentleman who's not with us today, meaning he's still on the planet but not in the room today, Lowell Vincent Muse. He was also part of the Spirits Known and Unknown workshop, and he was working part-time here at the Library of Congress. By this time, I was an undergrad at American U, and he mentioned, hey, you know, the LOC has these part-time gigs. I think it was 4 to 8:15 or 8:30 every day, 5 days a week. So you could get your classes out of the way, come down here, make some good old government money, right? And in my parents' generation, coming from the Carolinas, you know, you had reached the mountaintop when you had a federal government job. All right, you could basically relax and just know that you could put your kids in college, you could buy that boat that you wanted, or, you know, buy a vacation home or something, or whatever you wanted to do with it, right? So I said, great. I applied for the job. It was in the Stack and Reader division. Does that still exist? No Stack and Reader anymore? Okay, all right. But you know what I'm talking about. I was handling the PZs, a lot of the literature books, right? Okay, and running over to that conveyor belt to put, you know, books down that would end up in main control. And as would happen as you were going down the corridors of the Jefferson Building, every now and then I'd look up at the job board, and I saw this job from what was then called the music division, and it talked about, well, first of all, need to understand professional audio gear. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm on the radio, so that's a start. Quarter-inch tape recording, yeah, I can do that. Equalization, so on and so on and so on. And this would be a full-time job, you know, in the preservation of old materials like you see back in the back of the room. In our era, we were working with the 16-inch platters from Major Bowes Amateur Hour. I know you've read about it, but none of the people in this room have actually heard Major Bowes. Right? Nobody's that old. But you can hear recordings of it. That's what I was doing at first at LOC. And that lasted until probably the spring of 1973, when the opportunity to take a temporary sink or swim job at Channel 4 came up. TV engineer was what they called summer relief engineer. So you were working for union scale, and you would be working on whatever WRC NBC was putting on the air. But the caveat was you got a chance to make 3 on-air mistakes. That third mistake ends up on air, you are a memory. That means see you by nothing personal. So I gave up one deliberately. The second one actually was because I had trusted Pepco to keep power on all night, even during a thunderstorm. And of course, that didn't happen. So I was late for work one time. I never had that problem again. And so I got through the rest of my summer without getting to that third. They had a term for it. The initials were DS. So I got out of there without that third DS. But my parents were very disappointed in me because I was leaving a could-have-been permanent job for the federal government to take a chance on a temporary job in this crazy TV business. And I said, well, as politely as I could, I said, well, understand, you guys came up from the cotton fields. One of the things that you did by coming up from the cotton fields was give me the honor of not having to pick cotton at all except off of a hanger in the closet. Also, you've all given me a platform that I could hopefully write my own ticket as opposed to just following completely in your footsteps. So I said, that's what my mission is to go further than you've allowed me to go. Further than you all could go in your era, I got to push it further. So I took the job at NBC, and that was a successful summer, but it showed me that I could make it in show business. And that sounds like a kind of egotistical remark, but there was this little thing called the Watergate hearings that was going on in the summer of '73, and I worked, along with a lot of the other crew people there, we worked 22-hour days, 5 days a week. All right? So that means you would bring some clothes in with you on Monday and a bar of soap. You would sleep on a bench between midnight and 2 a.m., and 2 a.m. you were back on the stage lighting the Today Show. That's when I knew, okay, I could put up with the hours, I could put up with live television, because if you make a mistake on live TV, there is no bringing it back. That era was Barbara Walters as the co-host of the Today Show, and Frank McGee was the other person. John Chancellor was the nightly news guy. So that was the era, and I still had one more year at American U to finish, but I was like, okay. As far as I was concerned, it was going to be broadcast TV.
Fascinating. And let's talk more about NBC and Watergate.
Okay.
Because I think that's a very important area.
It's not relevant today, though, is it?
I think it could be. Could be. Could be. The way that things get lost, even in emails, it reminds me of the few minutes of, what is that, phone calls that were also lost. So during the time that you started at NBC, I can remember you telling me a story of some advice that you'd gotten. It started out, never use a hammer when a screwdriver would do. And I just wanted you to kind of like turn the corner on that story and let us know about how that advice really helped you to get through another very interesting situation at NBC.
Well, getting a job at NBC, number one, was a miracle, because I ended up going to the interview directly from the Jefferson Building on my lunch break, and I was tipped by a young lady up there named Easter Winters, who was the chief engineer's executive assistant, and she called me at work and said, you know, the interview that you had set up for tomorrow, by tomorrow all those jobs will be filled. Can you come this afternoon? And I was like, because I didn't have a suit on like I have on now. I had on a nice dashiki. You young people Google that. You can see what I'm talking about, you know. So here I am going to the most conservative of the then 3 networks, if you can imagine that, in a dashiki. I didn't like my chances, and I told Easter, I said, well, maybe. She says, no. If you come tomorrow, it'll be a purely ceremonial interview. Today is the thing. Went up there, met a gentleman named Mr. Kirkham, chit-chat. I tried to just blind him with my personality and good looks so he wouldn't see the shirt I was wearing, you know. And, you know, told him all the things I had done, Library of Congress, WAMU-FM. I did not have a first-class FCC license, which is one of the things he wanted. And we had a good interview, but now we're on our way out the door. We're about to get to the corridor, and I haven't closed the deal. And just before he gave me that last little shove back into the hallway, I said, oh, yeah, and how's that new PCP-90 working out? Which was the then brand new minicam that RCA had created, which he says, you know about the PCP-90? I said, yeah, absolutely. I said, it sounds like, and this is where I used my American University education. I said, this sounds like it's going to revolutionize the news gathering business. I was praying that something was going to get through to this guy. And he said, okay. He said, well, would you like to see it? I said, it's here already. He takes me back to the shop. He shows me this camera. We're sitting there like, pardon me, 2 ladies looking through the maternity room glass at this brand new camera. And then he whispers 2 words that I'll never forget. He says, when can you start? I said, well, I'll be back here at 5 o'clock. He says, no, we'll call you in 2 weeks. So cut to the story that Luis is referring to. So because it's a union shop, because it's a seniority shop, there are people that NBC had at the time in its employ that they couldn't be fired because of their seniority, but they had some questionable credentials. 2 or 3 of these gentlemen at the time were card-carrying Klansmen, not rumored to be, actual. And one of those gentlemen was the supervisor then Projection Island, which is where I was working. And, you know, he did a fair job of telling me how to turn the projector on and off, how to thread it, and so forth and so on, but he wasn't giving me any real details. And eventually, after 3 weeks of trying to appeal to his ego and other tactics to try to get him to kind of loosen up on some of that information he had stored up here, one of the black technical directors, a gentleman named Carl Bailey, I think he was the first black TV TD in the country, he said, man, you don't have to worry about him. Just go back to the maintenance shop, get the book, get the maintenance manual. I was like, yes. And he says, then you can come back on your lunch hour and you can read. I said, no. He said, no. I said, no. I'm going to bring that to my workstation. Yeah, okay, bring it to your workstation. I said, no, but listen to what I'm saying. Bring it to my workstation. With his orientation, there's no way he's going to walk past me, seeing me reading something, and not come to check on what I'm reading. Okay, that's the bait. And then I took another piece of my AU education and brought my little legal pad with me and a pen. I knew when he was coming back from lunch. I had the book open. I'm writing my notes down. I'm being a very good college student here. And he comes up over my shoulder and he asked me, was I trying to get a job in maintenance? I said, well, no. I said, well, you know, here's something you don't know about me. So I had already set up 3 or 4 code messages in this reply. Number one, my dad's a master carpenter. So that means he has a trade, you have a trade. The worst whooping I got from my dad, I've been disciplined, and you know what discipline is. You probably had it out some of yours yourself, you know, right? Was when I used a hammer and a screwdriver to do the job of a hammer and a chisel. And my dad said to me, boy, which is code number 3, right? If you can't use my tools in a proper manner, don't touch them. I make my living with my tools. And then I turned to him and I said, sir, I said, these tools back here are a lot more expensive. I just want to make sure I know what I'm doing. Victory. From that point on, he showed me every screw adjustment, every circuit breaker, every lubrication point, how to run the 35mm projector, which meant that when he was out of the building, I was the only person who could do Meet the Press. Because at the time, that was the only national commercial that Channel 4 ran locally. All the rest of them would run from New York. But, you know, I try to mention that story to folks today because folks that you don't agree with, you don't understand, or don't agree with if that is the door you have to go through, you have to go through that door. So I said, there's got to be a way I can get this guy to understand I'm not here to pour molasses in the equipment. I'm not here to spray paint NAACP over that projector. I just want to be an NBC engineer, a white shirt, RCA pocket protector, a little air hose to blow the dust out of the gate, and put my 8 or 9 or 12 hours and collect my check. Now, he never invited me over for dinner, but that was okay. That was okay. From that summer on, he basically made sure that if there's any question about that shop that I needed to ask, come ask him, because he knew where everything was.
Fantastic. I think there's a huge secret to success in what you've just told us, and your life represents that for us. So we are honoring you today, and I'm just really reminded of that with a story like that. Is it okay if we get to 1979 and go into L.A.?
Yeah, let's roll with it.
Okay,
let's
all right,
roll
good.
with it.
All right.
These people are only getting older out there listening to me.
It's 1979. What's going on? What are you thinking?
Well, after there, at that time before, and this is well before Homeland Security had come along, there were a lot more feature film shooting in D.C., at least portions of them. One of them I remember seeing was Being There with Peter Sellers. I actually saw Peter Sellers walking down 14th Street and some other locations. And so by this time, and I had also worked at Channel 7 Local, which was shooting news on film. And so that was my first professional experience working with film. So I said, you know, maybe it's time to think about taking the Nestea plunge and going to Los Angeles and just see if I could get into big show business. From Ben-Hur, I recognize that sometimes you don't recognize the miracles that are right in front of you, but miracles still exist. So in the same pile of mail that I got a no thank you from AFI when I applied to their directing program, good old Uncle Sam gave me a nice income tax return. I said, you know what, there's more than one way to get to L.A. So there was this airline back then called TWA. You all Google it, you young folks. Google it. I had planned to go to L.A., and I took a 90-day leave of absence from WMAL Radio, which was my permanent job at the time, to try L.A. I was also headed down the aisle in September of that year. Wedding plans are already in place. Deposits have been put down on a rehearsal hall or something like that. Why are you laughing, Sal? I'm trying to tell a story over here. You're interrupting. And as things do happen in your life from time to time, at the time, my betrothed and I were both going to L.A. because she was working here for WETA and planned to go to KCET in L.A. And, of course, I was just going to go to anybody out there to give me a paycheck. And then at the last minute or so, she decided she didn't think she could be that far away from her folks. So maybe we could get married, but then maybe wait till the next year to go out to L.A. And I was saying, I'm certainly not liking the sound of that, especially since I'm already unemployed for 90 days. There is no going back on that, leave of absence. They've already hired somebody else to cover me. So I said, you know what, think about it and let me know. But I said, my future, somehow I see L.A. in my future. And so she didn't move on her position, so I said, well, I think we're going to have to tell your parents that we're not getting married. Well, why don't we get, well, you want to, how are we doing this? So as it turned out, I had to go to Baltimore and sit in her parents' kitchen and very wisely tell her parents, well, I didn't deserve a woman as wonderful as their daughter. I didn't go and say that she was just a coward and just didn't want to take that next step. That wouldn't have been smart. There were so many butcher knives and other, things that could have been projectiles in the room, so we got through that and we were all cool after that. But that's when I realized that I was laser focused on this career. And as it turned out, had I waited a year, just so you all can jump to the next chapter, had I waited a year, then that would have been right at the beginning of the Screen Actors Guild strike, which shut Los Angeles down for months. I couldn't have even gotten arrested, and we're talking about LAPD. I couldn't have even gotten arrested out there. So timing is everything. And so I went at the right time. It worked out, I guess. Otherwise, Luis wouldn't have me up here listening, boring you with all these stories.
Well, I'm glad you selected your words properly for the young lady's family.
Oh, yeah.
Well.
I was like, I might need this neck some other time.
Yeah.
So,
Well, great, you still have it. What did a break look like for you once you were in L.A.? What did that moment look like when you said, well, yeah, I'm on the right track now?
Luis, that's a loaded question. First job off the plane. Now, I want to see a show of hands, and you young people don't even bother to answer because I know you're not up to this. Who's ever heard of Rudy Ray Moore? Okay, I don't see anybody with a full head of hair. Okay, Rudy Ray, the actual first person I worked for in L.A. at the Dunbar Hotel on Central Avenue, where he was living in the basement. And just to show you that I could remain optimistic. Because he was a nice cat, don't get me wrong, really nice cat. But his jokes were, yeah. So basically, when I realized that have I made the right decision? One of the first jokes I recorded that he said was, how do you keep the flies out of your kitchen? Well, it's real simple. You keep the bucket in the living room. And so immediately I started, and one of my assistants was like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm just trying to make sure that this is the actual bottom, that there's no other level below this. So I can only go up from here. So that was the actual first job. And then if you got a job that was 3 or 4 days in a row, okay, that's great. 2 weeks in a row, okay, that's great. It took me 7 years to get into the labor union out there, which is not the same issue as it would be today because the rules have changed. And I worked for a lot of different people, a lot of low-budget producers and directors. I would say one of the first big breaks I got was through a director named Alan Meyerson, who I had worked another 2 or 3 days, 22-hour days for a flat $100. And like a lot of people out there tell you, kid, you know, when I get some real money, I'm going to call you again. You know, how many times, if you had a quarter of every time somebody told you that, you'd be staring down at Bill Gates saying, see. But he did call. And that job turned out to be 5 months of work. And I was like, bought a new van, bought a lot of new gear. You know, I was respectable all of a sudden and started looking at the housing prices. You know, but it's really one job at a time, and it's really, my first 3 years were more like they weren't calling me, they were calling the person that they knew, and the person they knew may have been busy and said, you know what, there's this new kid out here named Russell Williams, he'll do a good job for you, give him a shot. So it was 3 years before anybody was actually calling me directly. They were calling Luis, because they already knew Luis. And you have to understand, regardless of gender, age, religious preference, ethnicity, the scariest thing in a highly competitive field is someone who is an unknown quantity. And once you find a team that works together well, that you probably, you know, the old Yankees that we all hated when we were outside of New York, the reason that they stayed the old Yankees because they very rarely took on any new talent because they had Murderers Row and all those other folks. So to get into that league, you could have been in the Major League Baseball, but you weren't going to be in the Yankees unless you were the best. So that's how most people think of their careers in the entertainment industry and other fields that are highly competitive. That's what makes it so hard to break in addition to whatever else they may bring with them.
Well, baseball will lead us right into Field of Dreams then, right? I guess that was a pretty decent break.
That was of the low budget, no budget films that I did leading up to that, that was the first film, when I read the script, I said, not only is this a great script, and then as the casting started to fall into place, I'm like, wow, I'm going to be working with great actors too. And I'd already worked with a director. That's one of the places I learned loyalty, Luis, was the only reason that Field of Dreams was offered to me. The director, Phil Alden Robinson, who was also the screenwriter, which he was much more comfortable doing, is working as a screenwriter. He told the Gordon brothers, now you all may not know the Gordon brothers, but you know the franchise that made them rich was a franchise called Die Hard. They came, and that was 1988 as well, so I must have seen Die Hard 1 at least 6 or 7 times in Dubuque, Iowa, because what other movies were going to come to Dubuque, okay, at that particular summer. Phil told them that the only way that he would consider directing Field of Dreams was if he could bring all the people from his first movie, which did, you know, marginal business, but they were impressed enough with it to give him that particular job. And they said, yes, if that's what it's going to take you to call action and cut. So bring all his people back into Field of Dreams also essentially got me Dancing with Wolves, because that was the first time I worked with Kevin Costner, and Kevin did a similar thing. He took people from different movies he had worked with that he liked and brought them to his directorial debut out in South Dakota. But I was really like honored to work with people like James Earl Jones, to meet Kevin, who was a really cool guy. But from going to the movies with my mom and dad for many, many years, I'm sitting there behind the console, and I'm looking at this guy with this gleam in his eye and his jaw, and I'm like, man, that's Burt Lancaster. I mean, I'm working with Burt Lancaster, and that's probably the only time I've been on a set, because we don't have the benefit of the music and whatever visual effects that you'll see in the finished product, but when Burt Lancaster walks across that first base line to become the doctor and attend to Kevin Costner's little girl, I have tears in my eyes, and I'm thinking, I said, wait a minute, what the hell is wrong with me? I said, this is not a play, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, he was just that good, you know, and I really thought that all those years of not knowing whether this move to LA was going to really be for anything, I said, okay. And I think the first week I was there, or first month I was there, I said, this is going to take 10 years. So this was basically 9 years into that 10-year plan. And one of the other things that I realized leading up to that was, and I'll tell this to everybody, that don't discount the naysayers that creep up on you. Sometimes it might even be your parents, besties, you know, somebody, your coworkers, and you have that dream and you want to like go out and do something and like, and you know, they may have the best of intentions. A lot of those guys I work with at WMAL Radio said, man, you're a fool if you think you don't get any work in Los Angeles. Okay, well, I'm that kind of fool. I got 90 days to find out whether your version of me is right or my version of me is right. But the naysayers are important because if they can talk you out of pursuing your dream, you weren't going to do it anyway. Let me repeat that. You weren't going to do it anyway. Because even if everything works out fine, there's still going to be resistance. You still have to be the best, which means that you got to put in the extra hours, you got to be competitive, you got to do all this new work to learn this new field. So that's with nothing else interfering with that. And of course, when I went to LA in '79, it was not an original idea. So there's a long line of people that get off the plane to LAX thinking they're going to do something in show business. So just look at that line and say, okay, well, I'll be here for a little while. But that's how we vet you. That's how we get rid of the people who are really not serious. Mm-hmm. You know, if you get a law degree, you still have to pass the bar before you can practice. So that's a vetting process. You get a medical degree, you have to pass the state boards before you can start chopping people up. That's a vetting process. But you have a grad degree in film or, you know, television or radio, and okay, so, all right, see that corner in the far end of the room? 18 hours you'll be in that corner making sure nobody walks into the shot for $100 a day flat, a tuna fish sandwich, and a glass of lemonade. And 3 or 4 weeks later, if you're still smiling, that's an indication that you're serious about being in this business. Mm-hmm. All other people run out of breath, and man, that's not what I had in mind, or I thought I was going to come in when there's going to be a red carpet. Right. Well, yeah, maybe if Halle Berry was on the same flight with you, but that's how we vet you. So don't run out of breath too soon. It's going to be a long marathon.
Understood. And your long-term planning is really evident in everything that you're saying, Prof. Well, let's talk more about being the best and the academy.
What, did Denzel come in?
You're
talking about me?
Yeah, we've got a certain version of that here with us today, as a matter of fact. You have the 2 Oscars, you've got the 2 Grammys.
Emmys. I'm working on Grammys as soon as I learn how to sing.
So Oscars, Emmys, and you're a member of the Academy.
That's correct.
So that's some phenomenal areas to talk about. Of course, last year, the Academy basically tried more inclusiveness.
Right.
We heard things from when Chris Rock was host
right.
that brought us to a greater awareness of what was going on in the Academy. Let's talk about what that means.
Okay.
Because, and, you know, I'm going to just set you loose on it because, you know, I want to make sure we get around to a couple of other things, especially the questions at the end.
Okay.
So the other thing that I was hoping that you would touch base on is that the Motion Picture Academy's museum is opening soon.
Correct.
And of course, they're thinking about ways to represent minority contributions. So with all that said, what can you tell us about the standards of excellence?
Okay. Well, with hashtag Oscars So White happening, I think 2 years in a row, that really, Cheryl Boone Isaacs, who was the first African-American woman to be the Academy president, and she had been on the Board of Governors for, I think, easily 15 to 20 years. She came into the business almost at the top. She came in the PR realm, and the first movie she got to work on, not like me, was Close Encounters. That's how she came into the business. So she saw the hashtag, she heard the outcry, but let's talk about why the Academy looks like it does. First of all, the film business started in the Jim Crow era of the United States. So it was very difficult for anybody with a permanent tan to get on the set to build a career long enough that you could be invited or be nominated for one of the 2 statues. There's only 2 ways to get in the Academy. You either have to be nominated for an Oscar or 2 people in the branch that you're representing, be it camera, sound, costume, acting, directing. 2 people from those branches have to send a letter saying, you know what, we want to consider Rosalind Williams as a new member. And the membership committee of that branch, there's 17 branches. Each one of those branches has a different set of rules. So imagine my surprise on, I think it was March 26th of 1990, that not only was I nominated and won the Oscar, but then they said, but I'm not automatically invited into the Academy yet. And that's when, excuse me, Southeast DC came out of my mouth. And I said, no, wait a minute, is that the black rule or is that the rule? And he said, no, it's in the rule book. And I said, what's the rule book say? So in other words, you needed 8 years of credits to be considered in addition to. And that's still in the rule book. So sound, for some reason, has the longest requirement of experience of any of the other branches. If you're in the acting branch, just the fact that you got nominated generally is enough to get an invite. So that's one. But now let's put this in the realm of sports, because I think it's a lot easier for people to understand that the academies, plural, meaning Music Academy, Television Academy, Motion Picture Academy, what they really do is keep people out. That's what they really do. Okay? The same way the Hall of Fame doesn't accept everybody, be it football or baseball, who's played the sport. Okay? Even someone like Karl Malone, who had 18 great seasons playing basketball, he never got a ring. But we can accept that in sports because, one, we know the score, we know all the statistics, and most of that process is transparent. We don't really see the Academy's process. I don't know whether Glory won by 1 vote or 10 votes or 1,000 votes. So I'm fairly sure that process will remain opaque. And so people don't trust it because they don't know what's going on, if anything, behind the scenes. I would also say that the whole concept of it being difficult to win an Oscar, an Emmy, or Grammy is going to remain. You know, they're not handing them out at Home Depot or at Starbucks when you get that extra tall latte. It's supposed to be a hurdle that you jump over. So that makes people upset because they're thinking, well, you know, how did this film not get recognized? Da, 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 da. It's a lot of that is math. Okay, if there were 350 or so movies this year that were eligible for Oscar nomination, let's say each one of those movies had at least 10 actors in it. Okay. So, and of course, some of these actors appear in more than one movie per year, but you're talking more than 3,000 roles, which have to be whittled down to only 20 nominations. So best, and supporting. So it's almost as bad as thinking that Powerball is a sure thing. Okay? And I can think of a lot of actors that are in the so-called tribe that didn't win Oscars, directors that, like Hitchcock, never won an Oscar. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times we may look at it as this is directed towards people of color, but what it really is that mathematically it's difficult, and then because of the way the membership looked at the time, maybe it was going to be more difficult for you to determine whether, say, Don Cheadle's role in Devil in a Blue Dress was him in character or that was just Don Cheadle. See, now we know Don Cheadle's got a whole lot of range. Right. But at the time, you know, I think some people were kind of befuddled. Is that kid really that good, or is that just him? So with the real push to diversify and also add a lot of younger members, the Academy is hoping that the representation in the nominations, which has been fairly good this year, will continue to go in that direction. But say in my branch, I can say with almost 100% assured there are only 5 African Americans in the sound branch and maybe 6 people of Hispanic descent of a branch that's about 450 people. Okay, so part of that is that what do we want to do in the business? Do we want to do sound, or do we want to act, direct? You know. So if no one is pursuing a career in sound, then that can't be blamed on the Academy. If I wanted to blame somebody, I might maybe drop the Image Awards, because the Image Awards very rarely highlights people's accomplishments behind camera so that kids like me trying to figure out what to do in show business would know, oh, wow, I could be a cinematographer, okay, because, you know, nobody's going to hire me as an actor. Oh, maybe I could be a production designer, or maybe I could do visual effects. And the only reason that I ended up even considering African Americans working behind camera was because in 1967, when I went to see In the Heat of the Night on the big screen for the 6th or 7th time, I said, wait a minute. I said, Quincy Jones did the score? I said, so what, the African Americans working behind camera? Now, in front of the camera, that was no headline. We had been there since the silence. But behind camera and an important role like that, I said, okay, note to self. Now, it didn't mean that I immediately started packing my bags, you know, in 67 and started working towards LA, but at least I knew the seed was there. I knew it was possible. And so when I did get a chance to shake Quincy's hand many years later, I told him, I blamed him. I said, you're the reason I'm out here. I just want you to know that. You're the reason I even put that up, you know, that thought in the air. So that, I think, is a little bit about the Academy, but you all are free to try your hand at it. I'll help you with your acceptance speech, and I'll point you to people in your field who can mentor you, because that's very important. And you can go on and get your own, because I'm tired of being only one of 3 African Americans that have multiple Oscars. We need a whole lot more folks in that crowd.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. I know that we're kind of rounding the corner on our time together, but I know that some nominees came out last night, Shape of Water and Get Out. Which one's going to win?
Oh, for Best Picture? I'm fairly confident that Shape of Water, because not that Get Out isn't an impressive, not only directorial debut, but it just changed the whole conversation in the room. But I want to say that Shape of Water, I think, by and large, is the kind of movie that has Oscar bait written all over it. Okay, one movie for sure that I was disappointed that did not hit the Best Picture 9, because we can have up to 10. I said, so what happened with that 10th one? It could have been Mudbound, which I thought was very well directed, very nuanced, beautifully shot. The first woman to ever be nominated for cinematography. After all these years, I mean, the first woman I met doing cinematography, I met here in D.C. in '78. It was a lady named Karen Grossman, who was here in town from L.A., and I'm thinking, you know, but Dee Rees, who directed Mudbound, also got nominated, I want to say, for adapted screenplay, co-nominee. Get Out, I think, is going to do well. But I'm kind of thinking at this moment, The Shape of Water is going to be the film this year in terms of Best Picture. And that's one thing I wanted to mention before we move on to the Q&A, is that in the branch, I can only nominate in sound. If my wife was in directing branch, she could only nominate for directors. If my cousin here was in the production designers branch, she could only nominate for production design. But then we all get to nominate for Best Picture. So that's why a Best Picture nomination is really, to me, more representative of the actual Academy than the actual branch nominations, which could be kind of more insider trading.
Well, thank you very much. Professor Russell Williams is second. I'd like to thank you on behalf of everyone here, Daniel A.P. Murray African American Historical Association, all of the library employees that have benefited from you being here so early. People like me can now walk through the halls quite confidently. I also would like to ask you what's next for you, and then we'll open it up for the question and answers.
Well, let's see, I've been teaching at American for 15 years, and I really have enjoyed trying to mentor some of the new talent. I have some AU students and former students in the room. Could I see some hands? Woo, baby. Now, not all of these students in the room got A's from me. But the fact that they understood that I was saying, okay, bring your game up a little bit more, I'll make that phone call for you, means that I hopefully did something right. I'm still very much interested in big show business, so anything above the line, now above the line, below the line means the creative labor, sound, camera, wardrobe, makeup, and hair, but above the line is writing, producing, directing, and sometimes your top flight cast. I'm always looking for opportunities and things in that realm. You know, my wife and I want to have a house in the vineyard. We want to have another house in Palm Desert. So it may be hard to accomplish that on an academician salary, but I'm always looking for opportunities to bring the younger generation in and turn them loose. But I can only do that if they understand Naval Observatory time. Okay. It's lesson number one.
Thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you, Luis.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 2018 Trailblazer Legend Award winner, Professor Russell Williams II.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Darren Jones, the Program Director for the Murray Association. In the interest of time, we're going to be able to take 2 questions because we don't often, in fact, we've never had a 2-time Academy Award winner accept our invitation and come here, and we are on a time schedule. We want all of you, if you have an opportunity, to grab a bag in the back as you leave out, but we also want you to take a picture with Mr. Williams, okay, if you so choose. So if there are any questions, we're going to be able to take 2, and then we're going to move on to our award presentation right here in the front.
Any questions?
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Melvin Whitten. I'm an entertainment lawyer, and we're really good friends. But what I wanted to ask you was, at Howard University School of Law, we had a motto that was called lifting as we climb. So as you climb, you know, how do you lift and reach back and bring others forward?
Thank you, Mel. Good question. At our Spirits Known and Unknown workshop, which started in 1971, our motto was each one, teach one. And that motto has served me well, my co-founder Gerald Bruce Lee, and hopefully all the people who have come through that workshop. And even when I was working in the industry, you know, I would look for people who were interested in what I was doing, or if they weren't interested in what I was doing specifically, to point them to the people that could mentor them. But at the same time, I was also vetting them. You know, something like Sergeant Waters in A Soldier's Story. It's like, okay, we're not looking for a bunch of foolishness because its image is everything. All right, and especially in the time I started working in the business, I had a couple directors said, man, you know, he says, your crew's all black. I said, yeah. He said, well, that's kind of unusual, isn't it? I said, well, I thought my crew should reflect the department head like everybody else's crew. And he said, oh, yeah, you know, you know what I'm saying? So you have to try to give them a little truth and not make it salty. But, you know, to me, Mel, it's always been important because, trust me, there's no way that I'm on the stage telling my story except for people giving me the opportunity to come through the door and people taking a chance on me. Paul Kirkham, Paul Fine, when he was at ABC. This guy named Bill Cooper took me under his wing when I came out to L.A. And that's another thing, if you haven't figured this out already, all your mentors may not look just like you. Okay? But if someone's willing to take the time to show you what made them successful, or even if they were an abject failure, show you how not to go down the road that they went down, which is very important. If I see another movie of someone going through the do not enter, bridge out, went over the bridge, went over the cliff, crashed the car, and then they crawl back up on their fingernails to the road. It's like, no, can't we have a movie where it shows you how to recognize the signs before you go over the cliff? That's the movies I want to see. Okay. Next question.
Yeah, this is a pretty quick question. Russell and I go back many, many years, and a third friend who goes back with us as well. I started a production company some years ago and picked up the phone and called the 2 of them. They got on a plane, and we did the 25th year anniversary of the Congressional Black Caucus. From Bill Cosby to Gladys Knight and whoever else were all in it. And I only had the nerve to take savings and buy cameras and equipment. They had the nerve to trust in me and come to do that. So this is lessons to all of you students that are in here. I was a student in that business, and this man really made a difference for me. So I've actually had a company and then sold one. So I'm only saying that to you to let you really realize that maybe you didn't get an A in the class. I did. Follow the lead. He's there for you.
Thank you. Now we're going to have a presentation of our highest award. We have our Vice President, Ahmed Johnston. And Ahmed is the African American History Specialist in Local History and Genealogy here at the Library of Congress.
Thank you, Darren. Once again, my name is Ahmed Johnston. Thank you, thank you. And on behalf of the Daniel A.P. Murray African American Cultural Association, we'd like to present you with this gorgeous award, Trailblazer for 2018. Thank you, sir. And we have other gifts. You never come to the Library of Congress and not get a book, right? We have Black Americans in Congress from 1870 to 2017. One for you and one for your wife.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Which means I'm going to carry both of them.
Once again, we thank you for coming, and what a wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay. I want to also thank you all for coming. We have grab bags in the back. The Murray Association is an association of the Library of Congress that was founded by one of our leaders here at the library. We do have applications in the back. Anybody who's interested in African American culture and history, we would hope that you would join. It's $5 a year. You will get emails to let you know of the programs we're having. And also, if you want to become a life member, it's $100. So we do have some life members. So see Teresa Davis in the back. Raise your hand, Teresa, to get an application, fill it out, leave us a check or some money, and we will get you on the list. We have grab bags in the back, and we also want you to look at the exhibit we have in the back.
Also, you can take pictures with Mr. Williams outside. We have a red carpet area that you can get selfies with them.
And thank you for coming, everybody.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.